Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new Math Skills Live Q&A. This time, we're talking about Gradle and Build APIs, which is great because I don't know anything about this, so I look forward to building up my knowledge on the topics. I'm Florina Muntenescu. I'll be the host for this Q&A, and here with me I have...
I'm Murat, the Developer Relations Engineer on Android.
And I'm Jerome. I'm the tech lead for the Android Gradle Plugin.
And I'm Wojtek, also Developer Relations Engineer.
So start asking questions. Use that YouTube chat in the page and ask us questions on Gradle and Build APIs. Until you do that, we're going to start with some of the questions we got previously on Twitter. So first question is, as a regular Android developer, do I actually need to know all of these new Android Gradle plugin APIs? What's the benefit? Wojtek, do you want to start with this one?
Yeah, I can take this one. As I got a similar question a few times already when I spoke to developers at conferences. And the good news is you don't need to learn all of the new AGP APIs that we have. There's really two parts to what AGP does. First of all, you have the declarative DSL that you use to configure your builds. And yes, as a regular Android developer, when you start building your apps, you do want to know how the DSL works. Unfortunately, with the DSL changes, there's not that many. And we also have, a Android Gradle plugin assistant that will help you with some of the upgrades. But then the other part is when you actually want to do something custom with your builds, when you want to build custom plugins, do some kind of post-processing, do anything that's not supported with the declarative DSL that you use to configure your apps, then yes, please watch our Math Skills series, read our documentation, and then you will need to learn the more advanced APIs. As for the benefits, I think Jerome can probably say why we needed to create entirely new APIs for this.
Yeah, so in the past we've had an API, but it grew out of specific demands from different people, and so it was very unstable and also inconsistent. So we decided to have a more consistent API that would provide an idiomatic way of extending the plugin. The benefits for the user, obviously, because it's going to be idiomatic, means that it should be easy to find documentation, examples, but it's also going to be stable, meaning that we're going to have to go through periods of deprecation when we want to change these APIs. So if you're using them and you find yourself using an API that eventually you would like to remove, you will be warned, you will have a period to change, to provide you a new way of doing things. So it's going to be a much more stable environment to work with. So that's really the core benefits. I think that a lot of people should find that those APIs are also easier to use and more consistent.
Since we are talking about complicated tasks, the next question is, how can I compute a value which is set as resValue or buildConfigField? So for example, I want to compute the local IP the system build is running in and set it via buildConfigField. This kind of reminds me of one of your episodes, Murat, the one where I think you were using the version number from Git and you were using it to update the manifest. Is this a similar use case?
Yeah, actually, this looks really similar. And yes, you can actually use both. During the onVariant callback, you can access the variant object. And all those properties are basically property, and you can later use these properties from another task and generate values lazily. Actually, this is, again, very similar to what I did in the third episode, so make sure to check out.
We also have some examples in the Gradle recipes project that we produce on GitHub. So you can look into Gradle recipes. There is a couple of examples where we set some build config fields from tasks. So it should be just a matter of replacing whatever we used to set with the IP address.
Are there any other resources that you think developers should check out when it comes to learning a little bit more about Gradle, except the recipes?
Yeah, there's also the new documentation page that we have. So if you don't really know what we're talking about here when we mention Gradle properties and tasks that work lazily and so on, then the documentation page should be helpful. And then, of course, Murat's series of videos and articles. And what Jerome mentioned is, I think the address is github.com/ Android/Gradle recipes. I might be wrong on that, but search for it, and there's some really good examples on how to use all of this.
Yeah, I was checking out today. It's under the Android repository. Yeah, so if you go under GitHub Android, you'll easily find it.
It should be linked in the notes below of this video. So just check it out.
Perfect, even easier. Oh, are you considering making a build system agnostic toolchain so we can more easily make another build system build Android libraries and apps?
I think I can start on this one. I love the idea. It's a great question, but unfortunately, I don't think we can commit to anything like this anytime soon. Now, parts of the Android build system have always been reusable. You know, you can use the, well, Kotlin compiler, it's even not our thing. So you can use the compilers, you can use tools like AAPT for resources and so on. However, large parts of what our build system does are built into AGP and also tightly coupled with Android Studio. So it's not that easy to just take all of that out and make that, you know, usable from outside. And also, you know, it's not easy to then support it as a product. We need to make changes sometimes to support new ways of doing things, and maintenance would be difficult with the number of engineers that we have working on this. So I think we'd rather, you know, make AGP work for everyone the best that we can, rather than try to support this kind of usage of our build tools.
Yeah, and then because I assume some people might have questions around the roadmap. If I'm not mistaken, there is a Gradle roadmap page, and I think it's also linked in the description of this video. So check that one out to see what are the plans. Cool. Kotlin supports generating API jars, and few build systems like Bazel already use it for compile avoidance. Could this be integrated with the Gradle or AGP?
So there's different ways in Gradle that you can do compilation avoidance. In particular, you know, there's configuration, what they call configurations, and you got the API versus implementation configuration. So that's the normal way in Gradle to do compilation avoidance. Another way that we're working hard with the Kotlin Gradle plugin is to provide our own snapshotting to ensure that we've got the best incremental compilation possible when using Kotlin. Kotlin historically has not been super good at doing incremental compilation, so we're really working right now on improving this situation. So, you know, short answer, we're not going to use exactly the same feature that Bazel is doing, but we hope to get to basically the same place or even better, because with incremental compilation, we can actually make it much faster than Bazel, which most of the time rely on recompiling each module entirely once something has changed inside it.
Has Google considered any official first-party solutions for remote execution with Gradle?
That is a great question. So it's not only Google, right? I mean, this will have to come from the Gradle ecosystem in general. We cannot just have a solution which would be working for AGP and not for Gradle in general. So this is a conversation that, you know, I'm pretty sure the Gradle Inc. company, which is not Google, has had with us and with others probably. There's no commitment from anyone at this point, but it's definitely something that you know, a lot of people have been talking about over time, and we certainly would like to see such a solution coming to life ourselves. So it's just a question of priority for Gradle in general.
Oh, the next question is around the dynamic features. Will the dynamic feature Gradle plugin ever be fixed so those modules do not require dependency on the app module, or stop breaking the unique package names feature?
So I think there's two parts to this. The first one, I don't consider it a bug. It's a design decision that was made to safeguard developers from accessing code at the wrong moment when the module is not installed in the app. So it's just the way it is, and I think I don't see any changes here in the near future. The second part, stop breaking the unique package names feature. So I wasn't aware of this. If this is really a problem, if it's breaking, then please file a bug. You can send it to us, to me on Twitter, and we can follow up and see if there's something we can fix.
Yeah, I think in general, if you see something wrong or behaving as it shouldn't have, create an issue on the issue tracker. Yeah, that's the easiest way to ensure that we know that it's happening. Cool. What is the recommended way to write plugins that should be compatible with multiple AGP versions?
That is a very good question. So obviously, the new variant API is why we started this activity. It's because we realized that for people who wanted to interact with AGP, it was extremely difficult to interact with a single one. It was even more difficult to interact with several versions of AGP. So we don't really have a very good answer for, past releases of AGP, and obviously I'm supposing that this engineer is looking into supporting past versions of AGP, and unfortunately the situation is not great. What some people do is using reflection. You could have the usual interface / implementation type of type of engineering practice where you have an interface and each implementation would be for each variation of an AGP. So the situation is not great as of today. What is really going to improve with the new AGP API is this stability and the ability to make sure that your AGP extension can work across versions. Unfortunately, the AGP APIs started getting released in 7.2, 7.3, and it's not even complete as of today. So depending on what you want to do, you may not have all the features you need yet. So, it's improving, but it's not quite there yet. We totally recognize that it was a very difficult situation in the past. We're trying to improve it. I don't think there is a real, silver bullet on how to do things. As of today, if you want to use past version of AGP, like I said, I think reflection is probably the safest trick. You could use interface implementations, but there's no silver bullet here.
Okay. What about library upgrade suggestions for Gradle Kotlin DSL? Is that arriving anytime soon? Also, maybe an easier way to migrate to it in Android Studio.
So do the suggestions not work when you have your build files in KTS? I'm not even sure. As for easier way to migrate, I think what we've done so far is basically given people some recommendations and guidelines on how to do it, and as in the form of a documentation page. So if you search on DAC, there is a page about some of the notable differences between Groovy and Kotlin DSL. We also have snippets on DAC now that show build files both in Groovy and in Kotlin, so you can always compare the two. I don't think we have anything that automates that process, though. Murat,
yes, especially for all the things which are not just declarative, I think it's going to be a very manual process. So it has to be a decision made by individuals to figure out, okay, do I want to continue using Groovy? Do I want to go to Kotlin? There'll be a cost. The upgrade assistant will help for all the declarative forms, but not for any of the extensions.
Wojtek, you were about to say something?
No, I was going to ask Murat, when you started your videos, I think the first one you had in Groovy, right? And then you moved to Kotlin. I don't know if you have any tips for people when migrating from Groovy to Kotlin.
Yeah, the first video shows both Groovy and Kotlin side by side, and actually I converted one to other. I mean, that depends on how complicated your build Gradle file is, but I remember also there's a page either on Gradle or Android website which gives you some guidance around which steps you need to follow to migrate from one to other.
Oh, it's not as easy as going from Java programming language to Kotlin. Are there any plans to bring Android Studio and IntelliJ closer to one another? Ideally, being able to use the latest AGP in IntelliJ.
So I'm not exactly sure what the question is, unfortunately, because as far as I can tell, there is nothing preventing AGP. So this is the Android Gradle plugin running in IntelliJ. IntelliJ has connection to Gradle, and so you could, I don't see why it would not work, or at least I've never heard. Maybe the user means that he would like to use the Android Studio plugins because Android Studio customization is mostly done through plugins as well. So maybe he wants to move some of these Android Studio plugins back into the IntelliJ platform. And that I am not a very qualified person to answer. I think there is a lot of difficulty. Each time we try to merge the code coming from IntelliJ, we have to spend some significant engineering time to merge things. So, you know, I'm not expecting that it would be a completely straightforward experience, and it's certainly not something that we are really testing. So again, you know, it should be theoretically possible, but you know, we have limited engineering resources, and we choose to make sure that Android Studio is working well, rather than have to figure out if it will work in IntelliJ on its own.
Is there some way to know which plugin added which task without reading the plugin source code or docs?
Yeah, this is a very good question. This is something that we've actually requested to Gradle itself. This is not something that AGP could do, obviously, but we also suffer the same issues. And when the Albert reports, we see tasks that we have no idea where they came from. And so this is something we reached out to Gradle with, and they agreed that they will be adding it at some point to the scan feature. So I think it should be coming at some point in the future that you can find out relatively easily from the scan. I mean, I think today you can find it, but it's not very obvious. I think the log will be more obvious in the future, and it will be more in your face to figure out which plugin created which task.
Okay. Oh, this is a big question. How does AGP work? Murat, I know you covered this a bit, right, in your videos.
Yeah, AGP is basically a Gradle plugin, which collects the set of tasks which is needed to build and package an Android app. Not sure how much more we want to go into detail with this.
Yeah, I mean, this is a very generic question. I mean, you have to understand that Gradle is a task execution engine. And so basically AGP, what it does, it reads the configuration, which is expressed in the build.gradle, and then it creates a tree of tasks from this configuration. And then he hands over that tree of tasks to be executed to Gradle, which eventually is going to run its engine and run those tasks. And the output of those tasks is intermediate files and eventually an APK that can be installed on phones. That's a very generic way of describing things. Getting into more details would require a lot more time.
Has Google tried switching from Bazel to Gradle for apps with thousands of modules to see where pain points are? Is there any way to do an incremental sync of a Gradle project when you add a new module?
Yes, very good questions again. So we do have what we call a project replicator, which is a way to basically extract information from build and replicate them locally. So we've been able to use that with some of our partners to be able to have Gradle builds that are thousands of modules. So that allows us to basically replicate the issues that our users are facing when they get into those type of builds. So we do see what the pain points are. We do know them, and we actually try to work very hard right now with Gradle to reduce these pain points. So the configuration caching feature that we've started making available to people on a pre-release state. It's not stable yet, but at least it's usable. Is the first item that came out of this activity. It's to figure out with Gradle so that the pain points for these big projects, what can we do? And one of them was clearly configuration time was a big problem. So but we are in the process of fixing it right now. The next stage will be the sync. We know that sync is extremely painful when you get into projects that have thousands of modules. So the way we're going to do things is by having a sync which will be more separate for each of the module. That means each module will have its way of syncing itself if you want. So that means that if you add a new module, you might be able to do a more incremental sync. Certainly, if you change one module within your realm of thousands, you will really only resync that module. So we hope to achieve very dramatic improvements there. So this is definitely something that we are tracking and actively working with Gradle to improve. But as you must understand, this is not something which is just about the Android Gradle plugin. This is an issue that ripples into Gradle itself, obviously.
For folks watching on live stream, do use the chat for asking more questions. We want to make sure that we answer all of your questions live. Next one. Can Android lint run against JVM only modules so it flags minSDK or desugaring issues with Java code?
I do not believe that you can do a mix of JVM only with some Android specific decorations like minSDK and desugaring stuff. This might be worth filing a request for enhancements and RFE and against us. We should definitely study how many people would be interested with such features. So we always try to measure the level of interest for new features, and that would be one good way of doing it.
Back to dynamic features. Is it possible to include different modules in different flavors using setDynamicFeatures?
So I looked into this question before, and actually I didn't find the right property on the variant builder or variant object. So it looks like we just don't support it, but there's no good reason as far as I know why we shouldn't be supporting it.
Well, yeah, we don't support it. The problem, as far as I can see it, comes down also to things like the dependency, right? You cannot set dependencies on a variant because it changes too much, and then you've got collisions, and it's just too difficult for people to understand, to comprehend how your build would look like if you start having variant dependencies. So a lot of people try to add dependencies to variant, and in fact they are just added to the project. It's kind of like a weird thing that Gradle does, groovy. But so in this case, I think it relates to that a little bit. Like you would not really want to add dependencies per variant. Again, I would not mind that people would file an RFE for this, but I am relatively pessimistic that we would want to do this in the future.
Can you share more about why we wouldn't want dependencies per variant?
There's plenty of. I mean, first of all, it's not possible right now, to be fair, but it would create a lot of issues, right? So let's say you have conflicting dependencies, that you would add a dependency to say a build type, and then you add another conflicting dependency to your product flavor. And then when we combine the product type and the product flavor, then what are we supposed to do? So this is not a problem that we've tried to tackle because it opens up a lot of different issues. We've always considered that variance is about changing, certain feature of the application, but not so much about how it's constructed and how having so many different parts that would be coming in and out. For that, we consider that you should be using different applications, basically. Again, I think this was a choice that was made a long time ago. Maybe it is time to revisit it, but that would be, we would need to have a fairly high level of third-party interest for us to embark on this, because this is not trivial.
Cool. How do I make my Android Studio project? How do I make my Android Studio create project using Kotlin Gradle by default?
So you cannot today, each time you create a new project, you will have to say that you want it to be using KTS manually every time. I do not believe there's any flag or any settings that will do it by default, but I may be incorrect. I do know that eventually this might be something that we would like to do in Android Studio, that in the future the default project would be created with KTS scripts. But we're not quite there yet. We don't think the ecosystem is quite ready. So it might take a few more years for this to happen.
And it looks like we're running out of questions, so I'm going to call the next one as the last question. I saw the Android Gradle Plugin Roadmap page on developer.android.com, but can you talk a little bit more about the deprecation that's going to happen in AGP 8, and how much work will it be needed for that?
Right, so I think I touched on this a little bit before. There's really two parts of this. One is the changing DSL, and the other is the new variant APIs and the removal of the old ones. So as long as you're just configuring your app using the declarative DSL syntax, then you will basically have to change some lines in your build Gradle files, and you will have the help of the AGP upgrade assistant in Studio to help you. With the APIs, it's a little bit more complicated because the actual plugins that you're using, so any third-party plugins that you have in your build files, will have to be made compatible. Is that right, Jerome?
Yes, I mean, once we will remove the old APIs, they will have to be made compatible. It also depends on how much customization you have in your build Gradle. So if you have a lot of customization, created a lot of tasks, wired tasks. If you've been, looking up our tasks and try to basically grab the output of our tasks directly to do something with it, this type of stuff will definitely require changes, because we are not going to make the tasks available in the future. We do not believe that tasks should be part of our APIs. We are changing them constantly to combine build flows, to split build flows, to make things faster or better. So, well, hopefully faster and better. Don't try to do this to make things worse, right? But the fact is that we don't want the tasks to be part of our APIs in the future. So it's clear there will be other means to get access, to have access to those intermediary files or whatever is needed. And that definitely is going to require some changes. So I would say it really depends. If you have a lot of declarations, like Wojtek was saying, it's going to be relatively simple. There will be the assistant to help. But if you've got a lot of customization, then it's going to be quite some time, quite some work to make it happen.
Yeah, we got. I think
something. Yeah.
Sorry, a follow-up question. I think kind of related to Gradle to AGP 8. I tried building my project, but the build failed, and I got an error like this is not compatible with Gradle 8.0 when my Gradle version is 7.0.3. What could be the cause?
Well, so there's various things. So this is most likely due to either configuration caching or project isolation, which are the two things that we are trying to work hard with Gradle in order to work on the problem that was asked earlier by Ken, I think, when he was talking about the Gradle projects with thousands of modules. So basically, when dealing with these thousands of project modules, we tried to work with Gradle on this configuration cache and on this project isolation to improve the situation. And those have certain restrictions. And in particular, you cannot access the project while you are executing the task and things like this. And so it's possible that you have either a customization that you did yourself, or it's possible that you're using a plugin that does the wrong thing. And it's not a problem right now. So this is really just a warning, but it's telling you that eventually when you will switch to Gradle 8.0, this will become a problem and your build will stop failing. So a good way to fix this is basically to run the build with the scan option, to have a build profile, and go to the build profile web page, and there you should find all clear documentation and information about what the warning was about, which task, what is the problem, and obviously some link to documentation about how to fix it. I think it's usually pretty straightforward and complete. But yes, it will require some work. First order is really to run with the Gradle profiling so that you can have access to this information.
Thank you. It looks like we went over all of the questions that we got, so we keep this Q&A short and sweet. And thank you for our panelists for plugging our knowledge, and thank you for everyone watching and asking questions. See you all next time with a new Math Skills series.